in a moment, and who will tease mercilessly, I think, for being a crotchety old bloke who breaks things just falling over these days. But we'll find out more about that. Just my usual start to the show, which is to remind you that it's a live show. It'd be lovely to hear from you. We're broadcasting live on various platforms, on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. So drop by, say hi, drop some comments in. My team pick them up, send them through to me. Or you can give me a call, 07506 319 745. That's +44 if you're calling from outside the UK, 7506 319 745. It'd be lovely to hear from you. You can send me a WhatsApp message or text or whatever. Anyway, here we are with Dan Flanagan, who set up Dadulthood Soul. Hello, Dan. How are you doing?
Oh, it was fine until you started teasing me about my crutches. No, thanks very much. Yeah.
You've reached that age where you fall over and break things.
I do.
It's hilarious.
It's not hilarious. It's painful, and it's kind of, you're making meals out of another human being in pain, which I find.
I'm really enjoying it.
It's really you wait. No, basically on Saturday I was just hanging out. Got out of the shower. I had one leg underneath the other. Got up off the sofa. The leg was a little bit numb, so I thought I'd walk it off with pins and needles, and then my leg just gave away. My ankle cracked audibly, and I writhed around in pain. So I had a big swelly ankle, lots of bruises, but fortunately the wonderful ladies and gentlemen of the NHS have given me some sparkly crutches to play around them. So yeah, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I live 3 flights up, so I'm kind of already bored.
I was just telling you about when I see Anthony Sher play Richard III, and one of the defining performances of Richard III, and he did it all on crutches. So I'm hoping that inspires you, Dan, to
get to the bathroom unaided, or where's our level here? Yeah.
Okay. So any thoughts about what Dan can do with his crutches and keep them clean? Please do send them. Actually, don't keep them clean. They're dirty. So do send us thoughts about what Dan can do with his crutches for the evening.
That would be great.
Because I'm sure he hasn't had any suggestions from his friends whatsoever on this topic. And so they'll all be welcome, I'm sure, and we can help them out. Good to have you back. How's Dadulthood Soul going?
Dadulthood Soul, since we spoke, has been through some, incredible changes. We're, for some of the viewers and listeners, we're a revolutionary grassroots movement that helps dads battle social isolation and loneliness, and we do this through a magazine, a radio show, and we used to put on, well, we still do, play dates for dads and kids. But then, obviously, we've had the last year or so our ability to do live events was just taken. So it was extremely challenging. First few weeks of lockdown, we did what everybody did and went over to Zoom. And I think that was the last time we spoke. We did an International Father's Day event.
That's right, yeah.
With some lovely chaps in Atlanta. And we had, Germany, German dads there, dads from Kenya, dads from the States. And it was wonderful, just a chance to realise that it doesn't matter what colour you are, what your background is. There's those common threads of fatherhood going right the way through it. We did a few of those, but then sort of Zoom fatigue hit in, because nobody wants to spend, everybody's working from home, especially if you're office related, you're spending your life on Zoom. And then hey, do you want to come along on Saturday morning and do some more Zoom? Was like, no, not really.
Yeah.
We hit some bumps. We got some funding. We ran out of funding, and then just, I think, before Christmas, had a major rethink. We lost, unfortunately, a few of our key volunteers. The pressures on their businesses and their families after a year of lockdown. The problem with running a non-profit, and you rely on volunteers. That's great when things are going well.
Yeah. But
suddenly people's availability to volunteer, those hours shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Their other priorities come to mind first of all, and you understand it. You've got to feed your family first before you help other people. So it took, there was some challenging times, put it that way. But I had a week off or a few days off over Christmas, had a rethink, and we're starting to look at things slightly differently. Lockdown isn't going away.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to do live events again, but probably not till the summer, because one of the beauty of the things we do is that interaction of the ages. So we managed to do a couple of play dates during lockdown, but imagine little Johnny's got his hula hoop and it's covered in snot and marmite. He wants to run over to little Brian and give him that. And we had to sort of rush there with our PPE and scrub it all down. And it takes all the fun of the play away. So I'm going to wait until things are a little bit better in the summer. But then we've started doing dads only events.
Okay.
So I'll tell you a little bit more in the evening. So yeah, it's been interesting. It's been challenging. I've met some fantastic people. I've had a lot of sleepless nights because of the uncertainty as well. So we all thought this time last year that this would be away in a couple of weeks. And if your organisation basically makes its money from putting on live events, and you can't, and then you can't again, and then you can't, you still have to pay the rent, you still have to pay the insurance, you have to keep the lights on, but you've got no way of getting income. And unfortunately, non-profit organisations weren't really first in line for any government grants. So yeah, challenging.
I mean, what's interesting for me, I'm glad you're still around. I'm glad we're giving you a platform for this. But what's interesting to me, it's almost like it's the same story with just about every man I talked about, or two, this last year, in terms of how guys do things in their life. And one of the big issues has been that, up till now, we've been used to, and the research backs this up, we've been used to sort of activity-based ways of meeting each other. And those activities happening real world, as opposed to any other way. And very much men get support from being parts of groups. Women tend to get more support from being in dyadic, intimate relationships, but guys not so much. And there's, research that came out this week, who's published in Men's Health, so people want to see it, looking at some of those issues. And I think all of that has been really challenged in terms of looking at the sort of socialising that we used to do, going to the pub, going to the footy, meeting up with our kids in the park, having a knock around, all of that sort of stuff, which is the way you were framing things. And I think a lot of men have found this year in particular as men really challenging because of that. What's been your experience like in terms of the guys that you have been working with, and with the sort of feedback they've been giving you?
It's been a real mixture. And also there's a huge wing. It's just because you're your dad. It's not, you like to go to a pub and you like footy. I don't drink and I don't know the offside rule. Yeah. So there are all these, sways of people that don't fit those general stereotypes. So even before lockdown, they would struggle to socialise. It's one of the reasons why, Dadulthood was so successful, because we hit things from a different angle, whether that be stand-up comedy or, rap or beat making or DJ lessons or 3D print. The dads that we're sort of still working with, we have a private Facebook group. It's got 600-700 members from all over the world. And there's some incredible stuff being shared. We have the jokes, we have the memes, we have the daftness, but then people come out with some really, really thought-provoking or very intimate stories or issues that they have nowhere else to share these things. And it's almost just, this is a safe space for them to vent or ask for advice. And there's a real lovely, sense of camaraderie, rather than, I read, what was it? I was listening to the Ramesh Raghunathan's podcast the other day. And he said, there's this attitude and behaviour when blokes get together, or men get together, you can't admit weakness because they will just tear. And I suppose, a lot of that is true, but in Dadulthood, some of that will be done, gently. The other times, if somebody raises a red flag about something, there's almost a rush of really amazing emotional support. And I think you walk into a pub and just say, hello, men, let's talk about your feelings. They're going to go, no, don't be ridiculous. I don't have those sort of things. But we kind of fostered this environment. Well, that's absolutely okay and actively encouraged. So there's still a lot of, I know a lot of people have lost their livelihoods, especially in the creative and the events industries. And they're working as van drivers and stuff to put a crust on the table, but they've almost lost a lot of their sense of self-worth because what they did and what they created was intrinsically so much part of them. It's really heartbreaking to see.
Yeah. So this issue about economic and financial insecurity and work insecurity, I know a lot of guys have talked about that, and it's long been known that men have a tendency to over-identify with work as part of their personality, as part of their identity. So when that's threatened, that's a real challenge. What sort of other issues have guys been bringing to you that have stood out to you?
It's I suppose, financial. The fact that, again, people have lost their work. It's their loss of identities. The fact that they, some of us, you get to a certain age, your parents are quite elderly. So even though you're a parent, you're somebody else's, son or daughter, and so there's all those sort of mixes of emotions, not being able to, look after people that really need looking after, and then all the other stresses of having to work from home, having to homeschool. The first few weeks of homeschool, I thought I had it dusted. It's great. I colour coded everything and had all this brilliant, curriculum planned, an hour of history there, and we'll do an hour of maths there. It went rapidly out the window. So if we can get through the day without having an argument, I'm taking that as a success.
Absolutely.
And I sort of invented things for us to do. So I've got a reasonably okay vinyl collection. So it's like, right, let's go through this. Pick out any covers that you like the look of. We'll play them, and you can sort of mark them out of 10, or I'll tell you a story behind that. We also got into reading. So my son is very, very active. His actual nickname, we was kid was non-stop. But we'd actually just sit there, and he'd have a book, and I'd have a book, and on the upper end of the sofa, and then we'd discuss or laugh out loud, and explain to each other what they think. So even though lockdown created some, absolutely horrible things, I've got some really lovely memories that took place that maybe we wouldn't have had the chance to make the most of, had it been normal duty.
I've had, this may or may not apply to you personally, but I've had quite a number of men say that one of the things that's been beneficial for them in lockdown is having more time with their family, and they're not particularly looking forward to getting back to the office full time. And quite a lot of guys are saying to me, I have no intention of doing that. I'm going to be maintaining some sort of work at home thing. I'm not sure they've told their wives this yet, but they've told me. But because they've really valued that. So that's been a sort of really positive boon. Have there been those types of positive messages as well that you've been getting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's people that have had a real chance to see the world of what they don't normally see. When I started Dadulthood 5-6 years ago, the reason is because I was commuting all the time. I was getting home very late at night and only seeing my son at weekends. And, as horrible as that, he didn't really know who I was that much because I just wasn't there. So now there's a load of dads that have had that stress on them intrinsically through the years, because that's what we're sort of paid to do, is go out, earn the bread and have this role. But now a lot of people have seen the benefits from staying at home and, being able to interact with kids. I think there's going to be so many other people that, will quit that 9-to-5 lifestyle. I think 4 days a week is going to become the norm. I think now the schools are getting back, you're going to see a lot more dads on the school runs and having their chance, because they've realised what they've been missing. But before, we almost weren't allowed that, or we'd have snapshots because part of our thing was, dads are often referred to as babysitters. So if you take the kids out, oh, aren't you a good boy for taking the kids and giving mum a day off? And it's like, no, I'm a parent. This is just what parents do. So again, lockdown has, shown people, or, a huge amount of men, what they've been missing out on. And that comes with its challenges as well, because there's a whole different way of having to think and having to act, and the juggles. But hopefully I think the benefits of that massively outweigh the downsides.
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to kids about what dads are, they often describe them as, well, I don't know, they're an absence more than else, because of this sort of association with going out to work. And a lot of guys, when they come home, they don't really want to talk about their work with their family. So there's that whole gap of, who is this person? And certainly, I think that whether is a family together, but there's also, I think, been particular issues. I'm not going to characterize necessarily bad, but there have been particular issues for families that are co-parenting, where the parents are separated and the kids are. So I'm in that situation where my son lives over in France, and myself and his mum have grown actually closer this year, I have to say. And have become more effective co-parents, and I've become more, in some ways, more important in his life this year. And the sort of what's been going on has highlighted the need to be, for us as a family unit, very thoughtful about how we do things, particularly because to go to see him, I have to cross international boundaries. So there are all sorts of forms to fill in and tests to do and things like that, And so actually we've worked harder but more positively on our relationship as a group of people, as a family, than at any other time. So there's been, not that I wanted the pandemic and I don't want it to carry on.
No.
I'm not suggesting I want it to end. I've had enough. I'm done with it. I don't want to talk about it ever again. That's it. But, it's made us work very consciously on making our relationships work. And that's been to our benefit. What sort of messages are you getting?
Yeah, I could say that for every one of those, and I'm in a very similar position as a co-parent myself, on that, there's the other side of the coin as well, where the relationships have got even more stressed.
Yeah.
And, there's some horrible situations of parental alienation that have been made worse because of the health issues. Yeah. So I had one friend in, particular, that had to keep going back to court because access to his daughter was just continuously being delayed. Right. At the very last minute. So 10 minutes before he'd go and pick her up, there would be this call, and it would be because it was better for her health. And it was every family has their issues, obviously. Yeah. But I think, sadly, I think it was a gift to a lot of people in some very strained relationships to be able to put more distance away between the dad and the children as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been interviewed a few times on what do I think has been the effect on relationships during the lockdown, and there's been some very interesting developments, such as people committing to relationships much more quickly. And so we've had a lot of lockdown dating, which have turned into people moving in together within weeks rather than years because of those types of pressures. We've had relationships really bonding and growing stronger, becoming more effective partnerships. And we've had relationships just ripped apart. And it's almost like the lockdown experience, the pandemic experience, has been some sort of truth drug. I sort of be describing it as a truth drug for relationships. If there were certain underlying problems, they're no longer underlying truth. They're right there, and they've either ripped or you fixed them. But for some people, it's made them really more effective. And then we've had new ways of getting over those commitment barriers for some people, because in some ways the pandemic has made the issue much more imminent, or getting on with your life. Do you think, so I don't want to go into this too much because it's a slightly long and contentious issue, but do you think this pandemic has worsened the position of those guys that already were marginalised? Because there's been a number of guys have been marginalised by this sort of family court system.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that marginalisation has grown this year, or have the family courts learned something? Are they working more effectively?
Yeah, I can't.
It's only your experience. I mean, we don't.
Yeah, I can talk from my experience, but mine, was able to be worked out. Actually, we did actually have a couple of hearings during the thing, but I can't really talk about that for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But from anecdotally from within the group, again, I just think it's even been quite stressful because your interviews and your court hearings are on Zoom.
Yeah.
Which is a relief in one way, because going into court can be quite terrifying and nerve-wracking. But then, if at least you can see people's body language. You can tell a lot from that. So, yeah, I think there's I can't say either way. It says, I know some people have really struggled it. My case is, again, slightly different, but I can't really elaborate too much on that.
Yeah, I mean, my boy went to court last year about his birth father, and he was very brave about it. And sort of the judge asked him, said, "What do you remember of him?" And he said, "Nothing." And it's very sad when you sort of have kids who say things like that. He's okay with it, he's sort of getting on with his life. He's very happy and very settled, and he has a good school and stuff like that. But
that's a very painful truth, isn't it?
It's really, I mean, it really is. I mean, it really hit me here. I went, "Oh wow, my God, Matty, you're carrying that." He's 10. He's like, yeah, whatever, and he's on to his next thing. He won't really think about this stuff as an adult till he's an adult.
Yeah,
and hopefully by then, our relationship will have in some ways compensated for any of the loss that might have experienced. And you never know, he may not experience anything negative from it, because sometimes an absence is just that. It's nothing, it doesn't mean anything because you never had it. So why would you worry about it? But it's a broad issue, I think, about guys, fathers, parenting, relationships, and how we are as a gender trying to deal with these issues. I'm intrigued as well in terms of one of the things I often say is this, that as a society we know when men are struggling because certain things happen, certain metrics give us a clear indication that men are struggling on a societal level. Violence goes up. Violence within the home goes up, drinking goes up, drinking-related deaths go up, suicides go up, and admissions to psychiatric hospitals for severe and enduring mental health problems go up. And all of them, oddly enough, this year, all those metrics have increased. And I'm wondering, sort of, in terms of the guys that are coming to see you, in terms of around those types of issues, are they present for your cohort? Or are they aware of it? Maybe not even for themselves, but for their mates and stuff like that.
I think there's obviously a lot more suicide awareness.
Yeah.
One of our sort of keys is, I think it was 96 men under the age of 45 are being lost each week, and a lot of that is around because men don't talk.
Yeah.
And a lot of that thing, obviously at that age range, a lot of those are dads. So it's another piece of work that we feeds into our approach at Dadulthood Soul. We are, it's a lot more where it's a lot more apparent. I think a lot more people are being open as well about their own challenges, whereas it was, seen as a sin or a weakness.
Yeah.
It wasn't till I can't remember what year, but suicide was actually illegal. It was. But if you're that desperate, I don't think the threat of getting nicked for it is really going to touch society, is it? I think there's been a lot of good work. Also, I think is it Ronan Martin Kemp's son just done a new documentary about the friend that he lost, and I think that's brilliant because that's even the 1 or 2 generations below us are actively taking ownership of this and discussing it, which is only going to make them better fathers.
Yeah.
So I think that's again, it's a horrible shame that they have to face it in the first place.
Mm.
But if they can face it and we can discuss it openly and rationally and encourage those men that when they are struggling to put their hand up and go,
yes,
I'm really, really struggling and I don't know what to do about it. And that's where the wisdom of the tribe comes in. Unfortunately, as men, we're sort of pre-programmed to try and fix. And actually what we need to do more of is just sit back and listen.
It's interesting because I think one of the pieces of research that goes on into the area of why is it that 75% of suicides are men, and one of the reasons being that guys tend to wait until it's really serious before they ask for help rather than the early warning signs. It's almost like it's not serious enough really. There's people have bigger problems than me, and it's a sort of there seems to be some sort of cultural barrier to say, you know what, I just don't feel right. It's sort of and like as a mental health professional, it's frustrating because I want to say to people, well, when you don't feel right is when you really need to say to somebody, I don't feel right, because and the model for the image I use is imagine getting an infection. When you first get it, it's not a big thing. Your arm doesn't fall off immediately. But if you ignore the infection and it grows, then it gets a problem. And it could get to the point where you have, serious problems. And it's that sort of image trying to get across to guys. But I think because we spend so much of our life being told that we have to provide, we're pretty bad at thinking about providing to ourselves because it's always about somebody else. And so being able to be sort of self-reflective and self.
Isn't there a line as well? It was a few weeks ago. I was really struggling. My sleep patterns have been all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was just getting continuously jaded after 2 hours sleep a night. But because I've got a good job, because I've got a roof over my head, exactly, I didn't have the right to complain. There's a line that the worst job in the world is a rat catcher in Mumbai. So as long as you're above that, then you should just shut up and count your blessings.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm really challenged because I can't concentrate because I'm not sleeping, and that's always having the reverse of it, making me even more stressed. So I can't sleep, and I'm trying to do too much in a day under, which would be a lot if you're working at 100%. But a lot of people, I think, especially over the last few months. So, you know what, we were meant to get used to this lockdown thing, but number 3 is actually, it's been really, really, really jaded.
Yeah.
And I've had enough and I'm just exhausted.
Yeah.
I found that a lot more open and it's allowed me to sort of put my hand up and explain that as well. Whereas normally I just go, yeah, but at least I'm not, bless her, a single mum on the top of a, with 3 kids on the top of a, multi-story tower block, on benefits. So I've got a lot to be, grateful for.
Yeah, and I think gratitude is a good thing, but it's also about encouraging people to recognise when they are struggling and just acknowledge that struggle and begin to share it, because I think that's really important. In terms of the sort of the classic signs of struggle as well, is this sort of increase in drinking, etc., etc. I mean, is it something an issue that's coming up on the forums with guys?
Do you know, drinking it isn't. I think people are rewarding themselves, if that's the wrong way or the right way of looking at it, because of the stresses of working from home and maybe homeschooling. So maybe that glass of wine or that beer has come down rather than being at 7 o'clock, it's been at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay.
But, you know, is that a problem, or is that just a part of the, you know, survival mechanism?
Yeah.
But, you know, it could be behind the scenes. Yeah, but there's not ready conversations that, you know, have been party to about that.
And so let's go on to the next metric, which is around the increase in aggression and violence, which is definitely happening.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can have a broader conversation with that because of what's going on at the moment anyway.
Yeah,
So,
I think well, again, it leads into exactly, you know, what's been in the news recently and the tragic events. I think it's very hard because almost the pressure's been built up because you're with the family unit probably a lot longer, a lot more than you have been, and there has been no escape, and there has been all these other pressures that, you know, you're much more likely rather to lose your rag, and there hasn't been that escape because you're in the house. So from a couple's perspective, I think there's probably been a huge increase in crosswords, should we say? But then obviously that leads into the more serious cases, which we were, you know, with the vigil and, you know, the tragic circumstances. Men as a violent species, if that's what is, you know, it's everywhere, isn't it? I think it's become, maybe has lockdown, you know, actively encouraged that, or?
Well, the figures would suggest yes. I mean, certainly domestic violence figures have increased. I mean, I think the attack on the young women on Clapham Common was very, very sad, but that type of stranger attack is relatively rare, and we would miss the point, I think, if we were to just say that that's what the conversation is about. I mean, certainly my experience of gender-based violence, which is the broader conversation, is I grew up with it. I mean, I grew up with a violent father, and that in those days was pretty much accepted as normal and okay. And certainly that, you know, these days, I don't think there are many parts of culture which would say that that's okay. There would be certain elements that are more tolerant of it than others, but my sense is that most of us understand that that's, you know, not okay as a behaviour. But certainly the figures are showing that the increase of the domestic abuse and domestic violence has increased. So hence the programmes that exist now that you can use a keyword in pharmacies and things like that, which because that's one of the places you can go to legally during lockdown is a pharmacy. There are other places you can't go to. So so they've been using that sort of thing. I'm just wondering if, you know, the subject is coming up in any of the forums in terms of guys talking about feeling their frustrations more, or even hearing about it happening in terms of their colleagues. And then sort of maybe we can branch out then to the conversation about...
no, not to the extent that maybe you thought it you know, would have done.
Yeah.
I think when like the Dad's Only events that we're developing, that I'll go into a bit more detail, we're going to have breakout sessions for wellbeing and, you know, hopefully some, you know, psychotherapist support. And I think that will be a safer space to have those conversations, because again, even within a group, if you've got 600 or 700 people, the fellas are very, very open, but still that there will be taboos. You know, we offer this thing where you can do something that's anonymous, for example. Where you send it through to myself or, you know, one of the other admins, and we'll publish it and get the support there. But that's, you know, we've been doing therapy for donkey's years, and to be able to be ready to have that conversation, it takes a hell of a lot of bravery and support. So I would say, you know, very few and far between would it be that even if it is a private group on Facebook, that's where you're going to start actually admitting to issues. We've had cases where the domestic violence has been the other side from what you would assume the traditional side is. So men as the victims or the survivors, if that's the right vernacular. But that was kind of pre-lockdown as well, and it's another way of maybe battling those taboos, because that's a huge subject that doesn't really get the airplay that it should do.
I mean, it's interesting. And then this is anecdotally, some of my male friends, in terms of relationships, have found the lockdown incredibly stressful, and they've had genuine breakdowns during this time, which have led to breakthroughs in their relationships with their partners, their female partners, where their vulnerability has come to the fore. And so their female partners, rather than dealing with a guy who's angry and fragile and brittle and defensive, have been able to approach a guy who's much more open and vulnerable and hurt, and is able to express that hurt. Certainly there's a number of guys I know, friends, where that has been the case, and that they've had breakthroughs. And I think there are some taboos around here, and let's just explore some of those taboos, because the broader issue that certainly the vigil is highlighting is that for many, many generations now, we've had another pandemic going on, which is a pandemic of gender-based violence. So, the statistics are very, very clear, 85% of all crime is committed by men. And that percentage goes up when you get into violent crime and sexual violent crime. It is going to the 90s. So there is an issue. That doesn't mean all men do this. And that's the confusing thing that people get into. It's a bit like that debate about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Well, Black Lives Matter is not meant to say all lives don't matter. It's meant to say that there are specific issues going on, that if you're black, that happen within certain contexts, and that it's meant to highlight that. And this idea that there's a gender-based violence doesn't mean that every single guy is automatically going to be really, really violent. It's not about that. But there is something about the culture of maleness and culture of men. You and I know it. I know it for sure, and I'm fairly sure you know it for sure. I mean, I avoid the sort of guys that, I don't want that shit in my life. I grew up with it. That's what my father did. I haven't chosen to do that. But I can't, suddenly become something other than what I am. I'm a bloke, And
is there something? It's not just about the violence; it's the threat of violence, right? And that is just as or more disturbing, because that's more apparent. Right. And also, it's not all men, but no, there's enough of them, so therefore there is a problem.
Yeah,
it's not that. Well, I'm completely innocent, so it's fine. Don't tell me. It isn't. It's down to us to, educate and inform and challenge and support our sisters in the fight, because it's not acceptable. And maybe I think perceptions have changed quite dramatically over the last few years. And you only just look at, popular culture. I was watching, I think there was a few weeks ago, we were watching a Mel Gibson film called What Women Want, right, where he is able to read women's minds. And the amount of shit, was coming out, he just wouldn't get away with it. But then that was just seen as popular comedy.
Yeah.
But that, I would say that it was the 90s, but actually that's 30 years ago, which shows my age. But it was just very apparent that was completely acceptable with a main, Hollywood name, and it was seen as a chick flick, so it was even more acceptable. Yeah. But if you look at it now with different glasses on, that behaviour is really, really damaging.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm aware, for example, with my boy, that one thing I'm going to have to deal with him at some point is teaching him how to deal with his aggression. And I'll do that. It's fine. I'm not worried about that. That's okay. I know how to do that. But I do have to be aware of that, and I have to be aware of the way I model dealing with anger and aggression now with him, and particularly in front of his mum. I have to be very thoughtful about that. So,
yeah,
I mean, myself and his mum, we don't particularly have blowouts or anything like that. But if we were to, it would be more important not to do it in front of him. And certainly, I'm also very aware of being thoughtful about how I support her in front of him as well, so that, you know, I'm modelling respectful behaviour towards a powerful woman in his life, which is his mother. And her and I talk about these things and talk about, and I think, you know, some men are not getting that and not understanding that their behaviour in front of other women as adults has an impact on the children in their life, because kids copy us. It doesn't matter what we say to them, they'll just do what we do. I'll say this to people, like, if you're telling a child to not smoke while there's a cigarette in your mouth, you know, which messages are they going to get? Clearly, the fact that you're smoking and talking nonsense to them. So, I mean, I'm just wondering, because I know that in Dadulthood, the image of what it is to be a dad is very important, and you explore these multiple images and these multiple ways of being fathers, which are breaking some of the sort of stereotypical ways. So what sort of things are you working on, do you think, with guys?
I think there's a way that we impact and work with your kids, where they be, you know, raising a race of female warriors, or, you know, it's educating the son. There was a piece actually I wrote for, obviously it was International Women's Day last week, and I got asked to write a piece for the organisation I work for. And I thought, well, I don't really have the right to talk about International Women's Day because I'm not one. But then actually I do have a part to play, and we all have a part to play. So it got me to reflecting on things that I can do as a dad. So it was, you know, understanding, or, you know, talking to my son about the strong female role models in our family history.
Right.
Telling her story as opposed to his story.
Yeah.
Or it reminded me that when he was about 3 or 4, he told me that girls can't play football. And I was like, yeah, well, I don't know if that's particularly right, mate. And I took him over to watch Lewis FC play, the ladies team, which I think one of the oldest teams in the FA. And he was just blown away. And it's like, yeah, so again, tell me again that, you know, girls can't play football. And, you know, that is part of my responsibility to parent. So, you know, he gets his opinions from me, from his mum, you know, from his mates. And if there's anything that needs checking, then, you know, it's our role and our duty to make sure that, you know, he does. I think he's a pretty, you know, hopefully well-balanced. We're certainly going into a well-balanced young man, except when it comes to taking the mickey out of his dad, obviously, because then all gloves are off.
Why were dads invented if not to take the piss out of? And wrangling forever. So
especially ones that fall off the sofa and break their ankle, you know?
Just with a dead leg.
With a dead leg, yeah.
It's got to be the best story I've heard. My ankle breaking story was equally amusing. I slipped on some grass and sat on my ankle. So there you go. I just literally finished climbing a mountain, and I've had.
Look, just drop that. I just literally finished.
No, I mean I'd got up and down a mountain. Yeah. Covered in snow. It was the middle of winter. 40-mile-an-hour gusts.
Yeah.
No problem. Got to the final field on the walkout and fell over my ankle. I mean, of course. The
bit I didn't tell you about my story was I was actually surrounded by ninjas.
Yeah, that's right.
And some lions, and there were some bad men. So I had to actually have a fight.
I knew that was the truth, and I knew you were just too shy to tell us.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to show off.
Opportunity, Dan, so that you could sort of feel that he wasn't an ego trip or anything like that. So there you go. And then remember to just keep those suggestions coming as to what Dan can do with his crutches. That would be good to know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Various ways of using them. I mean, I think it's really interesting that sort of thinking about the current context and climate, and thinking about while you're saying I'm not sure I have a place in International Women's Day. I get that. I mean, I understand that it's not my place, but there is looking at how we support it as guys, and particularly as fathers and role models, male role models, how we sort of think about how we communicate in what we do and how we are. And one of the interesting sort of things that people have said about the vigil, for example, is that quite a lot of the aggro was started by guys who turned up to support the vigil. This is credible sort of first-hand witnesses saying that, which is, really interesting. That again, it's a difficult one. That how do we model a way of being which is supportive, which doesn't perpetuate, I guess, the problem.
I think the other thing is to not. And I say this with all best will in the world, there will be people that absolutely get it, and there will be people that are struggling to understand. But then you'll have the I think it was one of the MPs. She called for the curfew at 6 o'clock, and I think obviously she was doing that tongue in cheek, but all she was doing was feeding, the right-wing press with this stuff just to sully the argument, and I don't think it was greatly helpful, because the only thing that reminded me of, I'm old enough to remember, when the Yorkshire Ripper was around, and the curfews that had to be put in place, and the whole, unfortunately in Yorkshire, also went into evening lockdown, and the fears, and it's we can't go back to those days. We have to know to, decent and honest behaviour with the security that, women of any age are able to go around what they want to do safely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of, I think it's an opportune moment in which to talk about these issues, because I mean, my view as a health professional is that, the whole issue of violence is so endemic that we need to look at a whole society approach, that we can't I think it's ridiculous to imagine that the police can deal with this issue that they haven't been able to deal with since day one. That's the ultimate definition of insanity, is you keep trying to get a different result from doing exactly the same thing. The police have never been able to deal with this issue, so I don't know why we imagine they can deal with it now. They're not going to. We need to do something broader than that, and something more than what you're suggesting, and I agree with you, it's more than something that just grabs headlines like let's have undercover cops in bars and clubs. I mean, the reality is this year we've seen a huge spike in violence and all the bars and clubs have been closed, so it's like I really don't see what that is going to achieve other than getting some nice headlines from, like you say, the right-wing press, because it's not. I think this is the core point, that this stuff isn't about criminality. This stuff is about an expression of something that belongs within a gender that is not managing itself and is out. Certain aspects of that gender are out of control, and we need to look at that. And I think there's it's what they say is a multimodal approach. So there's got to be issues around how we deal with it in the education system, the health system, the police, employment, etc., etc. It's all these things have to now come into play. But I think looking at it as a health issue, say a public health issue, we then have to go, well, you know, where does it start? Where is patient zero? Okay, we need to know where that is, and we need to know where, if you like, the infection starts, and then we need to do something about that and about cutting down those lines of. They did it in Glasgow not long ago with knife crime, and they took a sort of public health model approach, and they got rid of knife crime in Glasgow. It's unheard of. You know, knife crime was part of the myth of Glasgow.
Yeah.
That's what we knew about it, you know. But, it's virtually gone. So, I mean, I think there are some really significant issues there. And without it being an accusation, I think the role that men have to play in dealing with this issue is really, really important, I think. Really important. Not
it's opening up the conversation for people to speak.
Yeah.
You know, honestly and openly, without fear of attack. Go, you know, something. I don't understand why you feel like that. So can you educate me?
Yeah.
And just do it in an open dialogue, rather than saying, I don't understand, I can't speak out because I'm going to be attacked. So therefore, I'll keep my opinions to myself. And therefore, the intellect's never going to change.
Yeah.
I don't know. I genuinely don't understand why you think like that. Can you tell me what is it about my behaviour or that makes you think like that? And I'll explain why I think like that, and what you do is wrong. Then it's having intelligent debate and being open and very, very honest and raw, and probably listening to a lot of stuff that we don't want to listen to as men.
Yeah.
And hearing some very uncomfortable truths.
My experience, though, when you create male spaces that with that thoughtfulness in mind, that level of raw honesty is very, very quickly reached, and the trust and bonding happens. What's interesting is that research is showing clearer and clearer that men bond in groups really, really well. That's what we like. And if you create these group spaces, it's also, and my guest last week, Ali, was talking about this, about how you use some things that are intrinsic, if you like, to being guys to our advantage to create that bonding. And Ali did a lot of research he set up a treatment centre for addiction and trauma, but he innovated these ways of working, which he used Muay Thai because it was in Thailand, which is a form of kickboxing, and he did the research around this to demonstrate that you know, if you can, when you're working with young angry men and older angry men, which is often what he was doing, if you created a situation in which there was a perception of an outside enemy, you could get those guys to bond emotionally and be open and vulnerable with each other. And so he used the competition, Muay Thai competition, as a way of creating this sort of safe threat. And this safe threat released all sorts of bonding hormones in these guys. And we see that sort of activity all the time in men. And that's the thing about the group of guys going to the pub. It's that they create that bonding, not the drinking necessarily, but they create the bonding together. It's us and then there's them. And that's a very positive, healthy way. If we can sort of utilize those types of processes, actually what you get, and I'm sure you see this a lot in your group, that blokes can be really brutally honest with themselves and with each other. What it seems to me is lacking at the moment is that enough of those places where that can open up. And I find it sad when you tell me that, you know, you've struggled for funding this year just at the time when it's really needed, because the approach I think is needed now is to go where this starts, which is with guys, and do the work there. Because if you're looking at an infection model, that's where it starts, isn't it? And that's where we have to be working, really. And we have to be working not necessarily with these offender programs. I mean, there are various perpetrator programs around, but it's almost like too late by the time somebody's on perpetrator programs. You need to be much sooner than that, and with guys that maybe at the moment don't see that they're part of that issue.
I think there's something wider as well. I think when we I started Dadulthood, and we started putting on the dads and kids play days. It was a chance for dads to get together and bond. But what we realised is the dads can't really stick their hands up and say they're struggling when they've got little Johnny Houston who's a human climbing frame.
Yeah.
So with the new evening dad only events, I've listened to what's been going on. Actually, where is this space? But actually, we're not going to have a therapy group because that won't work. What we can do is take the best things out of the group. So we do the activities and the challenges and stand-up comedians and stuff like that. But we've had these breakout spaces as well. So I think we only just did the first pilot last month. So the idea is when the dads come along, they've got a chance to interact, have this level of camaraderie. What was really, really scary for me is that we did a survey of everybody, and 100% of them felt socially isolated. And this is dads from all over the UK, very, very different backgrounds, socially, economically. And then there was 83.3% of them felt they were sort of excluded from family life as well. And to get that, to me, was a very, very telling statistic. So we want to encourage these conversations and having these safe spaces. But you can do it, and there are, I imagine, some fantastic men's therapy groups. But a lot of men won't go there because they won't see that they've got a problem.
It's not appropriate to create those therapy groups. We are coming to the end of the show, unfortunately. When are these dads events happening? What sort of?
They're called the Dadulthood session. So they are on the last Thursday of the month at 9:00. Tickets are absolutely free. I don't want to exclude anybody because they can't afford it. It's an hour and a half. It's not on Zoom. That's the beauty of this thing, because we live our life on it. Got some very WYSIWYG technology that means you can move around different spaces, right. Have a table like you would do in a club. Last month we had a Peter Simon, I think the comedian is called, who was actually Daddy Pig in the theatre run of Peppa Pig. So open to all. Come along. The tickets, if you pop onto dadulthood.com, grab a space. Doesn't matter if you're on your own or you want to bring some pals and just have a space and watch some activities. Just come and hang along, hang out.
I'm going to be there for some of them.
Sorry?
I think I might be involved in some of them as well.
I think you were mean to me earlier, though. So.
Well, I was bloody away on holiday with my son. So.
No, I meant earlier today when you talked about my crutches. But I would love that. That's one of the key areas is that we're going to have these breakout spaces. So we've got a partnership with Wellbeing and Council. They've given us the lovely Tyler Slade, who's one of their professional wellness experts, who's going to own a space. No, we've got a lovely hangout space for you as well. So if any of the dads during any of the activities just want to come over and maybe access some expertise that maybe they couldn't afford or wouldn't normally want to go and see, it's great. Then we've got, we're in talks with a fitness expert. So again, you can go off and go, you know what, I kind of like to get rid of my dad bod, but I don't really know. You can pop down there. But these are going to be part of the activities. If you just want to come listen to stand-up comedy and maybe have a talk to the lads, you can do. But any time you can nip off to these areas and just have something without judgment, without cost. And I think the more we're able to signpost and make these sort of expert areas available to people, you're going to see a lot more people accessing them. Then we can demonstrate the use or the need to the funders, get some support. And the idea is that I want to do this learning on this new bit of technology, and then we can open it up to loads of other non-profit groups, because nobody else is using this tech in the way that we're using it.
It's a brilliant idea. And the next one is what date?
It's next Thursday.
Next Thursday?
The 25th. So it's 9:00. It's on this brilliant piece of software called Remo that we've been gifted by one of our dads of the blue light security firm, a lovely man called Luke Bryce. We've been supported by Comic Relief on this as well. So I know it's next week, but if you do want to buy your red nose, they do some really good things to help us, invest in this, make some mistakes, do some learning. And the idea is that we've got hopefully dads from all over the UK, if not Europe, if not, different time zones, coming together to have the sort of honest conversation, I forgot we're being broadcast, the conversations that you and I have had.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to see you next week. I hope to see other people at Dadulthood. Give us the website again. It's
www.dadulthood.com. If you put Dadulthood into Facebook, we've got a private group if you're a dad, or we've got a public facing one for mums and anybody else that wants to come and support us. Same on Twitter, same on Instagram, or I'm Dan at dadulthood.com. So if you've got any other issues or partnerships or anything you want to discuss, drop me a line. I don't know a lot, but I know a lot of good people that I can point you in the direction of.
Always the way, isn't it? So, and suggestions for what Dan can do with his postcard to BBC
on the back of a fag packet. Yeah, cheers.
There you go. Really good to see you. I'll see you next week, Dan. And great to see everybody. Next week, I don't know who we've got. We've got somebody on next week, and they'll be amazing. And I'll see you all here next week on the Wellbeing Show. Thank you all very much. Stay with us, Dan, as we say goodbye to our audience. Good night.
Thank you very much, Nolan. Thank you to producer James.